All right, let's talk about lie number 4, which is that faith is the opposite of knowledge. And again, this is something I've heard from non-Christians, especially the atheist community online, but I've even heard it from Christians many times. And me, you know me, I'm like banging my head on the wall, like, please don't say that, please stop. Like, it's been very important in my Christian faith, my experience of following Christ, and to stay committed in my faith, that faith is not the opposite of knowledge. And so could you walk us through this one?
Yes. And so again, this is one of these things that might not be outright said, but just viewed as like faith is just wishful thinking. Like I was just at Hobby Lobby yesterday, which I love Hobby Lobby, great store, but I was looking at the home decor and, like there's so many signs that just say things like this, like with faith, all things are possible. And I'm like, what kind of faith are you talking about? Like, 'cause I know people that have faith in like really weird things that if they like followed through with it, like they probably die, like with its faith is not just like this wishful thinking. And we even see this sometimes in Christian, like programming, just as you said, like in Christian circles. And it's just like, oh my gosh, like let's look biblically what faith is. Like, let's actually look. And when we see passages about faith, we're always seeing that God is constantly asking us to trust in him who we cannot see, because everything we can see points to him. Like before he gives, in Exodus 20, before he gives his people that, like the Decalogue, the 10 commandments, he says, I am the Lord your God who brought you out of the land of slavery, or out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of slavery. And then he gives them, the commands for how they're supposed to live. First, he reminds them of who he is and everything they just visibly saw, for the past several months. So it's just really important that we directly address this concept with our students, because our culture, whether it's secular or unfortunately many times Christians, just views faith as this subjective, personal opinion about things, or this wishful thinking. Last year, Leugen Ministries came out with their biannual State of Theology report, and they found that 41% of evangelical young adults, so that's not including, the 60% that, research has found has already walked away from the church, but, like those who have stayed and those who still consider themselves Christians, 41% agree that religious belief is a matter of personal opinion. It is not about objective truth. And it's just like our kids are going to be taught to believe, like this is just something that you hope for. It's not something you think through. I actually saw this I was teaching Sunday school at the church that I was attending back when I lived in Chicago. And it was between services, and I was out in the coffee area, and this little boy comes up to me and he's like, oh no, it's you. And I was like, well, it's great to see you too this morning. Like, why are you so excited to see me? And he's like, well, I hate it when you're our teacher, and seeing you here means you're probably going to be our teacher. And I'm like, what is going on? And I was like, well, why do you hate it so much when I'm your teacher? He's like, because every time I come here, I just say Jesus as the answer, and I always get a prize, and the teacher's happy, except for you. You ask me why Jesus is the answer, and you make me think. He's like, you're not supposed to think at church. That's what school is for. And like, I started laughing, and I was like, well, I know you did not mean that as a compliment, but that's one of the best compliments any child has ever given me. But I thought like, wow, how sad that he can articulate, I go to school, I turn my mind on. I go to church, I turn my mind off. And that's a lot of times our attitude towards faith.
As a youth pastor, I would go out of my way when I was asking questions for the students to make sure that the answer wasn't Jesus, because I didn't want them. It drove me nuts. Now I wasn't raised in the church, okay, so I'd never had that. So like to me, it always felt weird if I see someone who's been, forgive me if I say this in a clumsy way, but who I'll say has been churched in the cultural sense, but I'm not seeing a commitment to Christ. And whenever I see that, I would just be like, what am I looking at? What is that? Like, 'cause I never had that, right? Like I'm the only one going to church in my family, like when I was a kid. So I'm like, I remember finding out that there was even such a thing as Christian music, and something like, I think I was like 17 or 18 when I heard about VeggieTales. I was like, what? There's like Christian media stuff out there? So all that was very foreign to me. Salty the Songbook. I still don't know any of those songs. But I've heard people
That was weird. That was really weird. It's maybe good you skipped that.
I'm totally with you on that. And I think that I would want to drive this point home so hard and just tell people, if you have a belief that Christianity, that you're a Christian, and religion doesn't really matter about evidence and objective truth, it's just a matter of opinion, that damages the fundamental gospel of Christ. Like, I'm not kidding. It's so much worse than so many other things that you could possibly do wrong. Because Paul says, like, if Christ isn't actually risen, our faith is in vain. Yeah. It's futile. All of our beliefs don't matter if it's not based on a factual truth of a resurrected Christ. And if you say then that the factual truth of it doesn't matter anymore, I don't know if you're even Christian. Like, I don't know that you're not. I don't know what you are anymore. It's so fundamentally different than Christianity that I'm like, it's jarring to me. Like, I'm jarred inside to hear that they're doing a poll in a significant number of Christians, evangelical Christians, at least by cultural names, are saying this. Oh my goodness. Faith being the opposite of knowledge is a very dangerous doctrine that is not from Scripture.
Yeah, and that passage in 1 Corinthians 15 that you just brought up, that's actually what I recommend and what I do with the kids that God has placed in my care. That, once they understand this difference between subjective preferences and objective truths, then to read through that passage in 1 Corinthians 15. And just as a side note, most of the Bible is written at a third grade reading level. So third graders are not too young to be diving into Scripture, even on their own. So just read this passage with the kids that God has placed in your care, and then ask them, okay, with everything we've heard Paul write to the Corinthian church right here, is he saying that Christianity is a faith that's based on subjective preferences or objective truth claims? And then talk through that, and then talk through, okay, so what is he saying? So these are objective claims. If these claims are objectively false, then what do we do with Christianity? We put it to the side because it's of no value. If Jesus did not rise from the dead, we are wasting our lives. We need to move on to something else. Where if the objective evidence points to Jesus rising from the dead, then we put our faith, we put our trust in him, so that they can see and then ask, okay, so does the Bible, does it support this blind faith, this wishful thinking, or does it support this evidence-based trust, this evidence-based faith, so that they can clearly understand that, Christianity isn't subjective. It's not just subjective opinion. It's making objective claims, and objective claims are either true or false. So we have to make a decision. Either we think the evidence points that way and we place our trust in it, or we think the evidence does not point us that way, and we put it to the side.
Right. Yeah, this affects so many things because it'll kill your evangelism. If you think faith's the opposite of knowledge and all this stuff, you also won't be able to do apologetics. You won't be able to give people a reason to believe what Christianity is saying. Also, deconversion doesn't matter because you're just following your heart to whatever belief that you think is going to benefit you. And sort of, when I talk, an example of this from a previous lie would be, I talked to a transgender person and I was asking what makes somebody change from being a man to a woman, for instance. So if I want to be a woman, am I a woman now? And then he says, yes, then you're a woman now. I said, what about if you go through the sex change now, does that make you a woman? Okay, yes, that too. I said, okay, but what if somebody takes you and forces you against your will and they do the sex change operation, all the hormones and everything? Have you actually become a woman? No, you haven't, because you didn't want to. And I was trying to kind of narrow down, right, how we were defining reality. What we're getting our real making properties from is I want, therefore It's true. And it's that applied to religious claims. And then number 4, you bring in faith as the opposite of knowledge, and you just gut any religious claims of objective truth value. And all of a sudden, it kills evangelism. Who cares about apostasy? And there's no apologetics. This is dangerous stuff.
Yeah, and that's why, like what you're talking about, and why we did truth as the first one, because if we can really ground our kids in the objective nature of truth, then all of these lies become so much easier to tackle. Because as you mentioned, our culture is just saying that it's our subjective understanding that is what makes reality, where that's not true. Reality is objective. I don't get to play with reality by my feelings, by my just wishful thinking.
Right. If you've ever been surprised by anything, you know that your beliefs don't form reality. Right? When you wake up and you get ready for work, and then you start driving to work and you realize it's Saturday and you don't have to work that day. You believed you were going to work. You thought the place was open. You thought it was Friday. You believed it with all your heart. You got up, you lost sleep, you took a shower, you got dressed, you put on real clothes, and you went up to work. And nobody was there because your beliefs and your intentions and your heart has no truth-making abilities. It can't just turn reality in. But an analogy I like to give, we'll go to number 5 in a second, but I love this analogy. I would give it with the students, and I would talk about 3 guys jumping out of a plane. And this is an objective truth analogy. And I'll say one guy, he jumps out of the plane and he believes with all his heart he's going to fly. So he wears a Superman suit. And because he believes he's going to fly. So he jumps out of the plane with a Superman suit. Another guy jumps out. He believes he's going to go up. He's going to fly up into space. And so he brings a spacesuit. Right? And then the third guy, he believes with all his heart he's going to fall and he'll die if he hits the ground that hard. So he brings a parachute. What happens when they jump out of the plane? And then I just leave silence, right? Just let the kids talk, let them debate it if they need to debate it or whatever. And then finally they're like, yeah, okay, two of them die, one of them lives. That's what happens. And I said, what's weird is that when people go to the grave, we think that all of a sudden whatever we believe is going to happen to us. But when we jump out of a plane, we don't think that. So there's this weird fantasy land we enter when we enter into the religion zone that I don't want to be part of. Like, I'm not interested in that. And if I'm going to make up a religion, I'm just going to make up one that suits me better than Christianity does.
Seriously.
Because I'm not naturally inclined to do all the stuff that Jesus is asking me to do.